Good morning. It's Garland Nixon, and it is just about 10 a.m. in Maryland, just outside the nation's capital. I've got some great guests today. We've got Regis Tremblay from Crimea, and coming up after that, we've got my two good friends, Scott Ritter and Ray McGovern. Let's talk. Good morning, Regis, and welcome back to Saturday Morning Live. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to come on and hang out with us.
Great. It's good to be with you again, Garland.
Hey, before we get started, a guy that I think is a really funny guy, even though he's not trying to be, he always makes me laugh, and that's Russell Texas Bentley. Have you heard of? I don't know if you think the same, but he just comes on and he's just like telling me what's happening, and it can be like the most serious stuff in the world, and he just makes me laugh. He's like a natural comedian. Have you heard from Russell? What's going on with him?
Yeah, well, I haven't heard from him in a few days, but he's the real deal. He's got a lot of people that follow him, that like him. I think he's down to earth and he's real.
Oh, good. Yeah, we send our love out to Russell. I know and I tell you another thing about Russell. He's a brave dude, man. He's the real deal. All of these people talk tough. Russell goes out in war zones. This guy's like 60 some years old. He goes out to where he doesn't have to, where he's not required to do, like, I'm watching this guy and he's like, we're on a rescue mission, and he's like driving around mines, he's like bombs blowing up there. I'm like, my God, I don't think they come any tougher than Russell Bentley.
Yeah, as I said, he's the real deal. I've known him for several years, and I've done a video of his life actually that's on YouTube. He's quite the individual, I'll tell you that.
Well, share that video with me, and I will get it out, and I'll do my best to push it and get it out. I'd love for people to be able to see old Russell there. He's a funny guy. So let's start update on the ground situation. Here we're getting the Ministry of Truth is curating the information. We're going to talk about that, curating the information for us, but I'd like to hear from somebody who's right there. What do you know? The Donbass, the neo-Nazis in Mariupol, that kind of stuff. What's the latest?
Well, what I'm hearing today from a variety of sources is that the Russian and the DPR forces are just about ready to do an all-out assault on the vault, the tunnels below the Azovstal steel mill. The word is that they have water, but they don't have enough food and medicine to last much longer. I think the Russian strategy, and you'll hear later from Scott Ritter, who is really without an equal commenting on the situation there. I don't think they have much longer, and I think the Russian strategy is to be patient. Mm-hmm. Now, what I have also heard, because they are convinced that Mariupol is completely liberated, except for parts of the mill, the underground. Mm-hmm. They are now, I've heard, moving their troops back north to engage in the front along the Donbass. I think, and many people think, that this battle that is imminent along the front in Donbass is going to happen. It'll be, I think, probably the final epic battle of this war. The Russians are moving troops from both directions. They have them caught in what Scott calls a pincer or operation. They're just about cut off from any more food, supplies, redeployments, and I think it's just a matter of time. They're extremely well dug in. They've been there for 8 years. They're well fortified, but they're running out of ammunition. And I think when the Russian assault begins, and I'll be glad to hear what Scott has to say about that, I think it'll be an artillery bombardment nonstop. I think it'll be an aerial bombardment nonstop, and then they'll come in with the cavalry. That's what I think is brewing here in the conflict with Ukraine. I have to tell you, from what I'm hearing from a variety of sources here, the Ukraine military doesn't really exist anymore. This thing is just about over. For those people who think that Russia have failed or made bad decisions, Scott will tell you it's war, and you have to adapt and you have to adjust to what's going on the ground. And I think that's exactly what the Russian military has done.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what are you hearing about the surrendering? I have to say this because I'm a person, I believe in humanity, and I'm hoping that as many of these troops as possible in the Donbass, put up the white flag, preserve their lives. Because, I mean, number one, two reasons. Number one, in fighting, there's certainly people on both sides can die, and it would save Russian lives. It would save Ukrainian lives. But from what I've heard so far, there's been spotty here and there. There's been surrenders. I've seen a lot of numbers, but if you're talking 60, 80,000 people in there, not the kind of numbers that would really say that. What are you hearing about that? Mass surrenders or no surrenders or what?
No, there's been reports just about every day that the Ukrainian National Army have been surrendering in various locations. Nobody's surrendering yet coming out of Azovstal steel mill.
Right.
There's nobody. And I think they've been given the orders by the United States this is their Alamo. They want to sacrifice these people. I do believe that there are some very important high-ranking U.S., French, UK, and perhaps other military officials who have been commanding this operation. It's really obvious. They've tried with 6 helicopters to get them out. They tried with a ship to get them out. There's obviously somebody in there that the West does not want to give up.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's somebody or something. There's some reason causing the level of desperation that we see there. And do you feel like this? And I'd say, if you're hearing this, I've watched a lot of videos on Telegram. I've watched a lot of reporting on both sides, and it appears to me that even the commanders and the soldiers on the ground are being lied to also, because by their people. Because I saw a video where there was one of the Azov-style commanders asking for a Dunkirk type response to get him out, and we see these people in Donbass, etc., saying we need help. It seems to me that the leadership in Kiev is and I use that word guardedly, it's kind of feeding them the same lies, that they have a chance, that they're holding up. They don't know the desperate situation they're in, because they certainly wouldn't ask for something like that if they understood the gravity of the situation.
I think you're right. And, I don't think there's any doubt that the quote unquote leadership in Kiev is the United States military.
Yes.
There's no doubt in my mind. I've been saying it for quite some time, that this is not a civil war. This is not a proxy war. This is a war, a direct war between the United States and Russia. $33 billion more of lethal aid, United States promising, millions of more dollars. There isn't any doubt that this is a direct conflict on the playing surface of Ukraine between the United States and Russia. The whole goal has been for a long time is to take down Russia, regime change, balkanize it. And I think this is what this is really all about. People need to understand that.
It's interesting that we were discussing the lies that are being told to the people, to the soldiers of Donbass. I mean, of Ukraine, and to the people of Ukraine. They've been pumped up all of this time. It seems to me to believe that they could provoke some kind of war with Russia. They were taught to hate Russians, and then the West would come in and bail them out, and they would have, and that was all a lie. They're just being sacrificed like cannon fodder. But that takes me to this. The way they've been able to do that is misinformation. You are, in fact, an American citizen, and I'm sure you have heard of the latest disinformation governance board with one Nina Jankovic in charge of it. Let me get out of your way. Your thoughts on this debacle?
Well, I first saw Tucker Carlson do this on his show last night, I think, and it's the first I'd heard of it, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. It gets more absurd every day. Some 33-year-old woman who's written a couple of books and now is advising the Biden administration on what is truth and what needs to be censored. It's like, Orwell's 1984 was not science fiction. It's a freaking playbook.
And and the other thing is the level of incompetence. To me, let me be blunt. NATO is organized stupidity. These people are insipid morons. I mean, without even going over, I'm going to be blunt, without even going over to the Liz Trusses and the Olaf Scholz of the world, who are no intellectual giants by any stretch of the imagination. They bring this woman in, and I look, and she's like singing these disinformation Christmas carols and stuff like that. She's like doing karaoke. They're like woke hymns or something. I don't know. And she's singing like Mary Poppins songs. And I watched the first few minutes of it. I couldn't do it. About half of it. I'm like, I can't get these 2 minutes of my life back. Your thoughts on just that, how incompetent, how incredibly absurd and farcical that this whole Biden administration, without even going over to the other side, because as you and I both know, this thing is run out of Washington, D.C. But your thoughts on how about this? What this disinformation board and its chair really show and tell us about what we're dealing with here?
Well, I think they're telling us that this is 1984. Big Brother is watching you. The United States has Homeland Security. They have FEMA camps all over the country. The next thing we're going to see is re-education camps in those FEMA camps. Now, when you talk about incompetent people, everybody in this Biden administration is incompetent. Every single one of them. Tony Blinken.
Oh, God.
What a moron. An Ivy League nothing. And then you have Lloyd Austin, a 4-star general, coming across as really totally unaware of really what the hell is going on. And then you look at all of these people in the EU who are unelected, that making these decisions for the sovereign people of Europe. It blows my mind. It's really unbelievable how we could have gotten to this state. I think you and I know how we got there, though.
Yeah. What do you think about, I do want to talk about some of the stuff for Europe, but transitioning there, it seems to me that one of the things that has been exposed here is that the truth that Europe has no sovereign nations, that the European continent is nothing but a colony, a series of colonies for the U.S. And now when the U.S. leadership says to the leaders of these colonies, your job is to destroy your economy, to wipe out the lives and the way of life and the culture, just wipe everything out for your countries, that they just salute and say, yes, sir. Sadly, a lot of these Europeans are running around with their blue flags buying into it. But I think the economic pain is going to bring reality to them. Anyway, your thoughts on this whole thing with Europe?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The people in Europe and across Europe have known for a long time that their governments do not represent them. It started with COVID, when massive demonstrations from Sweden all the way to Spain and Portugal against the government mandates. We saw the people rise up. And I think what's happening now with these sanctions, which have boomeranged. I was watching some video today and some reports. The EU is suffering. They're in recession. They're admitting now they're in recession. Prices are going to go up 20 to 25% and more for energy and food. The same thing is happening in the United States. And I've been saying for some time, the only hope to end all of this is for the collapse, the complete collapse of the U.S. Western economy. And it sure looks like we're on the brink of that right now. And Garland, I've said it for some time. Will these crazed psychopaths who are controlling all of this, recognizing they've lost this epic battle for control of the future, take the whole world down with them in a nuclear Armageddon? I think we are so close to that doomsday today than we've ever been before.
I agree with you, and we can just hope, because here's the bottom. And what I've said about this is, if that happens and we can't control it, then it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's game, set, and match for all of us. So there's no point in worrying about that. We can't control it at this point. You know what I think is important? What I think is important is that we keep doing what we do, Regis. I'll tell you why. I have a radio show in Washington, D.C., not besides my Sputnik on Pacifica Network, and I have a radio show in Los Angeles. And I continue to talk to people about what's going on. And when this first happened, the callers would call in and call me a Putin stooge or whatever, that crap, right? Last night, the callers were calling in saying, "Thank you, Garland. Keep telling the truth. We're glad to hear this." Because I was pointing out, I went over that $33 billion and I reminded people, look, your life is turning into a living hell. And they got money for these friggin' goose-stepping, Sig Heil tattooed swastika Nazis. They got like socialism for them, and you get absolutely nothing. And people are starting to wake up. I believe it's slow, but I'm seeing some positive signs here. And I think that a combination of the economic pain, the greed, because I pointed out, look, Afghanistan, $1.3 trillion. It was a money laundering operation. Now, another money laundering. You're being had, that people are starting to wake up. I do believe I'm seeing some cracks of light. And I think that's why I believe that as the economic pain gets harder, the pressure is going to really ramp up on the leaders, whether or not, how they'll react to that. But I think some of them are going to have no choice, because in parliamentary systems, your government can be wiped out overnight. I'm not for economic pain, but, sometimes that's the only way people learn.
Well, my father always used to say, people vote with their pocketbooks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're exactly right. People now around the world and the United States are waking up. And I'll go back to what you just said a couple of moments ago. What you are doing, what I am doing, is awakening people as they are more inclined to say, wait a minute, what the heck is going on? And now they start to hear a different voice. Yours, mine, Scott Ritter, my dear friend Ray McGovern, and all kinds of others. They start saying, wait a minute, there's something to this. And so I do agree that what we have to do, we cannot give up what we're doing. And even those people who are writing letters and signing petitions and standing on street corners with their signs, if that's what they can do, they need to keep doing it, because all of it together as a conglomerate can help to overthrow the madness that we are being inflicted with right now.
Yeah, I saw it during COVID for the first year. Nobody was questioning the narrative.
Yeah.
And after that, I saw more and more people. I saw a guy named Matthias Desmet who woke me up a lot, talking about mass formation. And people started, and all we were saying to people was, these are policies from the government. You have a right to question the policies. I'm not saying that I know any more than you, but those of us who said we want to question the policies, we want more information, we want to know more, were treated as though we were, madmen. We were crazed. But towards the last 6 months, some of the same questions that we were asking that were valid questions started leaking out into the mainstream. I believe that the fact that those of us who continue to ask those questions and to push back and say it's valid, we're taxpayers, we have a right to ask our government valid questions, help create an environment now wherein the first couple weeks of the Ukrainian conflict, people were totally brainwashed. But I think some of the same dynamics from COVID leaked into this, and now we're getting I'm seeing in the US, I'm feeling positive, I'm seeing a similar dynamic where those questions are starting to come up and people are believing they have a right to ask them.
Yeah, I sure hope so. And with this latest Ministry of Truth, I'm waiting to hear how the vast majority of Americans are going to react to that. They got to be waking up when they're feeling the economic pain. They're feeling the pain at the gas pump and the grocery store. And now to have Biden announce that we're going to have a Ministry of Truth, well, a disinformation agency. I don't know. I just hope that the people can stop swallowing this and drinking the Kool-Aid. It's
Let me
really
ask you
disturbing.
This. Again, I like to look at the positive things. In a way, I can take something positive out of that because I do radio in Los Angeles and Washington, and I hear the callers changing now, thanking me instead of calling me names, thanking me for giving them information, telling me, literally calling in and saying, keep doing what you're doing. In fact, I will email you a link to my show last night. I'd like you to listen to it. I put it up on Twitter. I think the Ministry of Information, this Ministry of Information, whatever it is, governance board, is a sign of desperation. It's a sign that the information, they are afraid. Their lies and their narrative are so brittle. We are tearing it apart with truth. I think it's a sign that they're afraid and they're so hapless and incompetent that they don't have a clue that this is going to make it worse. I'm seeing, particularly now, I'm a lefty. I mean, I'm a far lefty, right? But, the only thing I care about is the truth. Especially in the conservative world and with Tucker Carlson and the libertarian world, people are going berserk saying this is too far. I think it's a sign of desperation, and in a paradoxical kind of way, it's a good sign for us.
Well, I agree with you. They are desperate. And Garland, the only thing they have is the control of the message, and they're losing it. And, I'm experiencing the same thing. I have people every day, and people I've never heard of, commenting on my YouTube, my podcast, saying, thank you so much. Thank you for the truth. We need you. We appreciate you. So I'm experiencing the same thing that you are. And I do think we're getting through. I certainly hope so. But, as long as they can control the narrative, we just have to keep banging against that dam. And hopefully that crack will eventually widen and break through with a tsunami of truth.
So let's go to something else. Gas for rubles. And these idiots, and I in Poland, etc. I saw a quote from like the energy minister or something like that from Hungary, where he basically talked about these other countries, and he says, I've never seen anybody heat an apartment with political statements. You actually need gas. And I also see that some of these countries are saying, well, no, we're not buying gas from Russia. And then they buy Russian gas, like another country buys it, and then they like buy it from them, but they're paying extra for a middleman. What's going on with the gas for rubles, and your thoughts on it?
Well, I think it was a brilliant move by the Russian Federation. People are saying Putin did this and Putin did that. Putin is a figurehead. He's a mouthpiece. He's only one part of a Russian governing body. But I think it was a brilliant move. My own feelings are that I wish that Russia would react in kind to the way the West, the collective West, has been attacking Russia. Cut the gas off. Send it to China. Send it to North Korea. Send it to South America. Send it to the people who want it, who are not unfriendly nations. Cut them off. This is war. It just troubles me that Russia is continuing to try to be the good guy, to send gas to these people, to send oil to these people. when the rest of the world is trying to crush Russia. I just wish they would stop.
Well, let me ask you this. I can see that, but my emotional side of me says the same thing. Cut them off. Play the game they're playing. But then there's another practical side of me that says, look, if these idiots want to give you like $1 billion a day and keep running their mouth, take their money. Take their money. And the other thing about it is this. The price is gone through the roof, and the stupid things that they're doing is driving the price up higher. So if I'm Russia, I'm like, you just drove the price up another 20%. What the heck? So in the long game, you're taking money. I mean, if sucker's going to give you your money, his money. Was it a P.T. Barnum that says it's a crime against God and nature to allow a sucker to keep his money? So I can understand taking their money.
No,
And one last thing, and power is only power until you use it. Then it becomes force. I'm holding an ace. We can keep playing this game as long as we want, but don't forget, if you do something stupid, really stupid, I'm going for my ace. So in a way, I can say, these idiots that are saying, well, NATO wants to get involved. NATO wants to get involved. Well, I can say, yeah, the day that happens, yeah, you guys are all out again. It's not just that, but it's nice to hold an ace in your hand. So I can see some practical, strategical reasons to keep taking the money off of these suckers and to keep an ace in your hand that they know you can drop anytime you want.
Well, I agree with you. It is about the money. Russia is making a lot of money off of the transactions for gas and oil. There's no doubt about it. And that's why they're continuing. Now, the ace in the hole, Putin yesterday let them know what the ace in the hole is. We have weapons that you have never seen. You have weapons that you cannot counter.
Right.
And if you continue to threaten us and threaten the security of the Russian people, we will use them wherever.
Right.
And this is where we are today. People should not doubt Russia and the spokesperson, President Putin. They have these weapons, and if they are threatened, they will use them. God forbid that those decision centers in London, in Brussels, it's not Kiev, London, Brussels, and Washington make the mistake of crossing that Rubicon, because it's going to be all over.
I also think that within Kiev and within probably Lviv, there are places where there are centers, decision-making centers, where there are NATO and US people in there, you know what I mean? That they have some places there in Ukraine. And that's also a threat to say, we know you have people here. We know where they are. And if you push us too far, those places will turn into vapor.
Yeah, well, Russia sent a message yesterday. They sent those Caliber missiles fired from the Black Sea directly into Kiev, and they blew up a place that was supposedly developing weapons or whatever. That was just a message. That was a message that we can hit you anywhere we want at any time. And those decision centers, we know where they are.
Your thoughts on we're hearing a lot about two places that most Americans know nothing about: Transnistria and Moldova. Update us on that stuff.
Yeah, well, Transnistria was a breakaway kind of republic from Moldova. They're pro-Russian. I understand they use the Russian ruble, and there were some attacks on some ammunition or oil depots that happened yesterday in Transnistria, but what I'm hearing is I don't think they're going to go much further with that. It remains to be seen, but that's basically what I hear it is today. As of today, there have been a couple of attacks, and so far nothing further. I think Russia will do everything it can to protect it and maybe absorb it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do you think Russia is going to go to Odessa? Do you think they're going to fully cut off Ukraine from the military? From the sea? I tend to think the answer is yes. They're in for a dime. They're in for a dollar. That they're looking at this and they're going to say, that will give us complete control of our or complete protection that we need. I think they're going to end up. I think they prefer not to really damage Odessa because culturally and for so many reasons that they don't want to damage the city. But I think once they complete a lot of their other missions, Donbass, etc., and it's obvious that the Ukrainian military has completely fallen, I do believe they'll go to Odessa. I do believe they'll cut off the sea from the rump state of whatever's left of Ukraine.
Yeah, and Russia has time on its hands, let's face it.
Yeah.
I think they've only used about 25% of their military. They have a lot more that they haven't used. And I'm not talking just in terms of men.
Right.
I'm talking in terms of weaponry. I do think, because Odessa is such a strategic port on the Black Sea, that Russia is just biding its time, and it is going to want to control all of that.
Yeah.
I do not, I didn't used to think that Russia really wanted to partition Ukraine, but, it's looking more and more to me like the western part, Poland wants it badly. You look at the history of Ukraine over a couple hundred years, and you can see that it was just sort of pieced together like a puzzle.
Yeah.
And I didn't think before that Russia wanted to take back everything from like Kharkov all the way down to Odessa. But now I think they do. They want to bring that into their sphere of influence. The Donbass republics, that was part of their territory. I think that's the scenario. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. What about some of the other places around, some of the other former Soviet Union entities, South Ossetia, Kazakhstan? We're seeing some of the other places around Russia feeling that, it seems to me, they're looking at it and they're saying Russia's very powerful militarily. We see that it's economically stable. We see that the West is getting unstable. It appears to me that there are other areas around Russia that are like starting to feel like they want to huddle a bit closer to Russia. And what other things do you think we could see?
Yeah, I agree. I think as this thing continues to play out, some of the former Soviet republics have got to realize that their future, their security is not with NATO, not with the United States. It's with Russia. And, we haven't talked at all about the elephant in the room, and that's China.
Yeah.
China is now in Iran and promising all kinds of assistance, including military. Their military representatives were just there meeting. This is a message. This is a message to the United States, to NATO, that China is just biding its time. Do I think China is going to enter into the fray in Ukraine? I do not think so. But China, with its military might, with its economy, with this partnership that it has forged with Russia, declared on February 4th by Pu and Xi during the Olympics, that they basically told the United States and the West, your game is over. We're moving on without you to a multipolar world that is based on the strict observance of international law, the United Nations Charter, the respect and dignity and sovereignty of all nations. That's a wake-up call. This is what Russia and China and India and Pakistan and Iran and Venezuela, most of the Southern Hemisphere, this is the direction they're going. Development and the fairness and equality of all peoples.
I'll end by saying this. I think this is as every bit as important to China as it is to Russia, because they recognize that the U.S. empire has its crosshairs on them too. I don't think they will, simply because they don't need to. They understand that Russia has the military and economic wherewithal particularly the military wherewithal to see this through in a way that they can impose their will on the situation. I think that China will be in the background doing everything they can to provide economic assistance to ensure that Russia economically makes it through this all right. It appears to me, looking at the strength of the ruble and the commodities that Russia has, that they're going to be fine. But I can't say the same for the EU. If I look at this, I say Russia can provide their own energy. They can grow their own food. They can build their own stuff. They can make it. The U.S. industrially not so good, but they can grow their own food and create their own energy. The U.S. can make it, although it's very unstable. The EU can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are toast. Last statement before we jump over.
Well, I would like to say this. In terms of the negative effects of the sanctions on Russia and Crimea, they have been negative. We've seen a slight rise in food prices. Russia's got all kinds of gas and oil. It's never going to be an issue here. We go to the market almost every day. There's nothing lacking. There's no shortages of food in the supermarkets. People are hardly even talking about this conflict anymore. They're not even talking about what is going on in Europe and the United States, as we've been discussing for the last half hour. They are living their lives like they always have. It's really, Garland, it's wonderful. I live here, and I can tell you that life here in the Russian Federation is good, is harmonious, is peaceful, and I think the people are united. Putin's popularity ratings are in the mid 80s.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking with Regis Tremblay. Regis, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on YouTube as Trem Reggie, or they can just Google Global Conversations Regis Tremblay. They can find me easily there.
All right. Thanks a lot, Regis Tremblay. Certainly appreciate that. That was great. We had a half hour with him. Now we have coming up the one and only Scott Ritter. I'm hoping for Ray. I've spoke with Ray McGovern, and oh, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, things are looking good. It's that's Regis. I thought it was Ray. Well, that's all right. But Regis is still there. Let's bring him on there. Regis, just to say hi to Scott. I know you've had him on before.
Oh, Scott, it's good to see you. I got back to you. I hope we can do something maybe tomorrow, but my friend, you are nailing it day after day on so many different platforms. I only hope that more people can hear you.
Well, thanks. I'll do my best to be able to do something with you tomorrow.
Great, Scott.
All right, Regis Tremblay, we're standing by, hoping Ray gets here. All right, Scott, so let's get going. I've got hopefully Ray will be up soon, but there's plenty. Let me ask you this before I got to ask you this, Scott. Before we get into anything, it has become farcical. This Ministry of Truth thing, this disinformation governance board, and they put this like woman in charge of it. She's like 30 years old, and she's singing like woke disinformation Christmas carols and stuff. It's farcical. Your thoughts on, before we get started, your thoughts on the Ministry of Truth disinformation board, Scott Ritter.
Look, in a nation like the United States, which has for nearly 3 centuries trusted its people to take seriously the privilege and the right of free speech, it is the greatest insult in the world when anybody ever attempts to superimpose above the people. The people are in charge. I don't know what part of the right wasn't given to us by our masters. This is an inherent, inalienable right that defines we, the people of the United States of America, as part of the process of forming a more perfect union. Okay? We own the truth. We are the truth. And it doesn't mean that you and I have to agree. It means that I own my own truth, and I get to express it as vigorously and as enthusiastically and as either fact reinforced or fact free as I choose to. That's my right. And your right is to do the same for you. Hopefully, as part of a civil society, we can get together and agree that when we disagree, we will discuss this. We will have a debate, a dialogue. And, the beautiful thing about democracy is it's that process of discussion that A, informs people, mm-hmm. and B, allows them to make informed decisions. So when you bring in the Ministry of Truth and you seek to spoon feed people, what you're saying is, one, we don't trust the American people. We don't trust them. And two, we don't trust the Constitution. We don't trust that which defines who we are and what we are as a people. This is an aberration. This is an abomination. I can keep going with these kind of words all day long to describe it, but it's not American. It's the most un-American thing you can possibly think of. The government doesn't get to decide what the truth is. End of story. The government works for me, works for you, works for everybody else. They are not the final arbiters of truth. The Supreme Court is the final arbiter of the law as interpreted by the Constitution. But the United States government is not final arbiter of truth. I am, you are, everybody listening in is. And somehow we've got to remind them of this.
You know, I will. One more thing I'll throw on this and get your comment from it. And I'll tell you what I told Regis. You know, I do shows in Pacifica shows, DC and Los Angeles. And the first couple weeks, my position is solid. You know, you'll never see me rooting. If there's Nazis on doing something, you're never going to see Garland rooting for the Nazis. Okay. And the first week or two, you know, I was called a Putin stooge. People called in, well, I guess you're on Sputnik, so no wonder you're on here doing this stuff and blah, 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 right? I got attacked, right? I didn't know if I was going to get thrown off Pacifica or whatever, but I said what I believed. Things are changing. Last night, the last couple of weeks, the calls now say, thank you for telling the truth, Garland. Keep doing it. The calls have shifted. I think people like you and me and Regis and Ray and all the people that are out here day after day saying you're being had, here's what's really going on there. I think they're getting scared. I think this ministry of truth is a good sign in a paradoxical way. It's a sign that their lies are falling apart. Yep. And they got to try to, in some desperate manner, to stop it. And even this is going to backfire on them, because I think a lot of people are waking up saying, whoa, what the hell is this, Scott?
No, you're absolutely right. Look, you know, I voted for Barack Obama. I know politics is a personal thing, and you should never, you know, air out your political laundry, because the implication is because I did X, if you didn't do X, you're wrong. Right. No, but what I'm saying is, I voted for him. I knew he was inexperienced. I knew that he didn't have the resume to be president of the United States. And I knew that he was being hyped up because of, you know, I mean, we saw it with the Nobel Peace Prize issue on, you know, day one, doing nothing. But I believed in the promise and the potential of this man. And yet I saw him speak at Stanford University, I think last week, where he talked about disinformation and the destruction of American democracy, and the arrogance and hubris of this man to imply that he was the bastion of truth, that he was the filter for America, and that if it didn't pass through his filter, then it was harmful for democracy. And I'm not picking on Obama, I'm picking on everybody like him, because in the American elites today, especially on the Democratic side, which shocks me.
Yeah, same here.
The Democrats were a long time the side of the ACLU. You know, they were defenders of free speech and everything. It's supposed to be the dirty, you know, conservative Republicans like me that want to suppress people's right to speak. But you know, this is disturbing that we have a situation now, because of the partisan divide in this country, that information war has become an integral part of who we are. Instead of being the exception to the rule, it is now the rule. And we're allowing politics and perception to define what, what qualifies as fact. And we're ignoring reality. But as you brought up about Ukraine, you know, reality hits home with the weight of a ton of bricks, meaning that you can spew all the hot air you want about this, that, and the other thing. But eventually, reality don't care. And you can't talk yourself out of truth coming at you. And in the case of Ukraine, you know, we were getting spun. You know, war is a very complicated thing. And when you throw hundreds of thousands of people in conflict using the world's most dangerous weapons over a landmass the size of England, not everything that occurs is going to be a victory for one side. It's give and take. War is ugly. It's a battle of attrition. People die on both sides. And yet we were spinning dead Russians early on, not we, but the media was spinning dead Russians as this great victory for Ukraine. Now what we're finding out is even the liars can't sustain the lie anymore, meaning that the four-star generals that get on mainstream media, these aren't military experts, by the way. They're paid shills. Their expertise left when they entered the room. They aren't. I receive the same training as they do, and I can tell you that nothing they say is doctrinally correct. They're using the wrong terminology. They're simply pointing at a map, drawing a green line, and saying gunk. So they're not military experts, but they now have to basically understand that when you're looking at the map, there's only one way to read it, and that's called reality smacking into you like a locomotive.
Well, we've got Ray. We've got Ray's bookshelf. Ray's here, and he'll be with us any second. So we're very happy to have Ray. So let's start this while Ray's getting his sea legs under him, shall we say? Give us an update. Tony Blinken. Oh well, the Russians. Like one Ukrainian guy with a bayonet took out a column of Russian tanks. A brigade, as it were. What's really going on? Where are we now? What is the shape of the battle theater, Scott Ritter?
Well, the first thing we need to understand is what happened. The Russians went in with a concept of operations that it appears was premised on fundamentally flawed intelligence. I call it the greatest failure of military intelligence since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when Israel failed to predict the Egyptians crossing the Suez Canal. The Fifth Department of the Russian security, the FSB, apparently went in and bought off a bunch of generals, or tried to buy off some generals and buy off some politicians. They got signatures from mayors guaranteeing that there would be no resistance, and they had assurances from generals that Ukrainian troops would remain in the barracks. And so the initial columns that went into Ukraine were told to operate not using traditional Russian doctrine, but what they call the flow of water technique, where you pour water down a hill and it goes through the path of least resistance and all that. And it worked great. Deep penetrations, impressive, this, that, and the other thing, except that the Ukrainians were waiting in ambush. And the end result were several very well executed ambushes, which annihilated platoon and company sized formations of the Russian army. Despite all this, and after the first 3 weeks, Russia had achieved a 7-to-1 kill ratio. I'm not glorifying death. I'm just telling you that normally in war, when two sides are fighting this kind of combat of attrition, even when the Germans were fighting the Soviets on the Great Eastern Front, the combat ratio is usually 1.2 to 1, meaning that the Russians were killing a few more Germans than the Germans were killing of them, and eventually the Russians got the upper hand and pushed them back. The Russians now are killing 7 times more Ukrainians. We're killing 7 times more Ukrainians in the opening phases of the war. So anybody who thought that the Russians were losing, just simply, they don't understand military math. Now the Russians have moved into phase 2. Phase 2 comes after they shaped the battlefield in phase 1. Phase 2 right now, the Russians are basically a 10 to 15 to 1 casualty ratio, meaning they're slaughtering the Ukrainians as we speak. It's not even a close fight. They've modified their doctrine. They're not using overwhelming fire support backed by immediate massed assault because, as Putin said, we're doing this literally by the book, which means I'm not going to lose any Russian troops. I'm going to kill lots of Ukrainian troops. So it's a very slow, methodical battle where the Russians pound the Ukrainians to death and then move in slowly with their armored forces and infantry and kill whoever's left. Are the Russians taking casualties? Yeah, it's war. They're taking casualties. But again, for every Russian that's going down, 10 to 15 Ukrainians are going down. You can't win when you're talking about this kind of loss. You can't sustain it. And I think what we're seeing right now is that the Russians are basically grinding the Ukrainians down to zero. Russia will take no risks in the East. Russia is going to operate on its own timetable. All the artificialities of time come from the West. You want to know where the 72-hour fall of Kiev came from? General Mark Miley, testifying to the United States Congress, said, I expect the Russians to take Kiev in 72 hours. Well, thanks, General. It didn't happen. And now we have everybody saying the Russians want to win decisively before May 9th. I didn't hear Vladimir Putin say anything like that. I didn't hear Gerasimov say anything like that. I didn't hear a single Russian. It's all coming from the West trying to impose an artificial timeline so that if Russia hasn't finished the fight in the East, they can say, oh, the Russians are behind schedule. They're losing. No, Russia's not losing. This is the reality. Russia is at risk. I'm telling you, there's some dangerous things happening right now. The most dangerous of which is Transnistria. Not probably said that wrong, but it's a Transnistria maybe.
Well, let's hold on. We'll get onto that.
Sorry.
We'll get onto that later. Ray's here, and but because I want to ask about what's happening in Moldova, Transnistria, Poland's making, saying they may want to come in and take part of Western Ukraine. We need to talk about that. But let's start with Ray, the one and only Ray McGovern. Ray is a former CIA analyst. He's a co-founder of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Ray served as a CIA analyst for 27 years, from the administration of John F. Kennedy to that of George H.W. Bush. His duties included chairing national intelligence estimates, preparing the president's daily brief, which he briefed one-on-one to President Ronald Reagan's 5 most senior national security advisors. Ray McGovern, welcome.
Thanks, Garland. Sorry,
Let's start here, Ray. I've asked every guest, and I got to ask you about this new Ministry of Truth, Governance, Disinformation Board. They've got this weird 33-year-old woman who's singing disinformation Christmas carols. That's all I can call them. I said to Scott, in a paradoxical way, I think it's a good sign because it shows that their narrative is falling apart and they're desperate. But from a Orwellian perspective, it's kind of frightening that this is what our country has fallen to. But Ray McGovern, your thoughts on the Ministry of Truth?
Well, I think it's parcel of the real problem here, and that is that most Americans, including people like Biden and Sullivan, have been marinated in a kind of a stinking brew of misinformation and Pollyanna kind of projections. Here's Austin saying, Ukrainians think they can win. Everybody here thinks they can win. There are 30 of us, we can win. Well, let's say he believes that. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He is sadly mistaken, and this is consequential. I mean, it's as though Pollyanna has a tenured seat at the Pentagon, I mean, his predecessors, McNamara on Vietnam, Rumsfeld on Iraq and Afghanistan, Gates on Afghanistan. I mean, all these guys reassured the president, we're going to win. There's no doubt about it. We can't lose. Well, they tucked tail and went home after they didn't win. Now, what's the difference here? The difference here is that the United States had no real existential threat in Vietnam or from Iraq or from Afghanistan. The existential threat that I believe Vladimir Putin faces is very real in his mind. It may not be real in the mind of our pundits or our even senior advisors, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they think. It's what Putin thinks. And he sees this as a very real threat. Why? Well, because this is a danger. You put these kinds of missiles that they can easily switch into in Romania and Poland. That's an existential threat to the Russian ICBM force. So this changes things. Putin can't tuck tail, get out of there and lose. It's his backyard. And so if the situation is such that Putin must win, and I think it's not only a personal thing, he thinks that defending Russia dictates that Putin and Russia wins. Well, where does that leave us? Let's say Scott and I were wrong, and that the Russians can't pulverize all that new weaponry, That's I don't think we were wrong, but let's say they drive Putin into a corner. Now, this raises the specter of the use of nuclear weapons. Now, this is not Scott or me or you, Garland, raising the specter. It's Putin himself. Is this unusual? In my view, this is virtually unprecedented. It's sort of like virtually being pregnant, but I can't remember, and I've go back a ways, Russian leaders threatening to use nukes, and that's precisely what Putin has in effect done. Now, so the question arises, is this just a deterrent, like all other moves of this kind over the last 4 or 5 decades? Well, I think you can't dismiss the notion that if you drive Putin into a corner, he has these super fast missiles go 5, 10, I most recently read 20 times the speed of sound, okay? And he can pinpoint his target. I think the president needs to be worried about whether Putin, with his back to the wall, might consider using such weapons. That's the first time I think this is a reality, but it's really important. I think Jen Psaki and his other advisors are saying, well, this is bluster, this is pretending. We can't afford that, okay? Because not only because of that, but because of my favorite theme here, which it's my favorite theme because I think it's actually correct and nobody else usually says it, China. Now, China has just been designated, I guess it's very proud of being enemy number 1 of the Pentagon. I mean, the Pentagon has issued its quadrennial, every 4 years report, strategic, and it says 2002, China is the number 1 threat. Okay. Well, so what does that mean to China? You're President Xi, you're looking on and you say, oh, we're still the number. That means after they get finished with Putin, we're next in line. I mean, there's also a very congenial, a very friendly relationship between Xi and Putin. But Xi is not going to look after Putin first. He's going to look after China. And it's as long as U.S. and NATO are preoccupied fighting some kind of war in the West, which I believe they cannot win in the traditional sense, then Xi can, go back and say, well, we can prepare what we want to do in the South China Sea, East China Sea against Taiwan. And the U.S. is distracted for years, perhaps, if Millie is right. And so, China looks at it with mixed emotions. But when push comes to shove, my prediction is that China will raise a little dust up out in the East if Putin is in trouble. And therefore, Millie and his associates will be faced with the prospect of a 2-front war. And that's exactly what no military man with any common sense at all wants to face.
Scott, something we're getting into, and I think it's important we talk about this because one of the fears is that that the Ukraine crisis expands. So we're seeing some action going on in Transnistria. Which, like you, I never know if I'm pronouncing it right, much less spelling it. Moldova, although I hear that the leaders of Moldova are saying we don't want no problems. And there's an article several articles that say Washington and Warsaw are plotting some kind of a move in Western Ukraine. Your thoughts on all of that, Scott Ritter?
Well, I'm going to list the 3 biggest threats that I see coming out of this war, because I'll list 4, actually. First is Finland. Finland, Sweden joining NATO. This is, it's literally the definition of eastward expansion of NATO to the borders of Russia. What part of Russia says this will not be allowed ever? Do we not understand? Do we not understand that Russia doesn't bluff? Does Finland not remember what happened to it the last time it chose to side on the wrong side of history? Finland's lucky to be a nation state today because the Soviet Union decided in 1949 not just to swallow them up and make them another Soviet republic. They allowed them to exist based upon a treaty where Finland swore in perpetuity and maybe the Finns have a different definition of that term, that they would be neutral in perpetuity, and they would never again allow their soil to be used as a jumping off point for foreign forces to threaten Soviet/Russian territory. Can you not read a map, Finland? Don't you understand how close you are to St. Petersburg, Russia's second largest city? Do you not understand that the Germans used your soil to attack the Kola Peninsula, Murmansk, Archangel? And the Soviets never forget, the Russians never forget, and they never forgive. So Finland is flirting with the end of Finland. I don't mean to hype this up too much, but Russia's not joking. Finland cannot be allowed to join NATO. That's sort of an end game there. So we need to be prepared for a very long, hot summer. The next area that I'm worried about is Western Ukraine and what Poland's up to. I don't believe Poland and NATO is in the business of redrawing the maps of Europe. It's been a European, black letter law that after World War II, borders don't change. Now we broke that, of course, making Kosovo, and we sort of shied away every time we ethnically cleansed people in Croatia to make the lines on the map even more pure, ethnically pure. So there's a lot of hypocrisy here with the West, but we are condemning Russia for absorbing Crimea. We are condemning Russia for its move to absorb the Donbass, a new southern, expanded Crimea federal state that includes Kherson. And so we're going to then turn around and allow Poland to take Western Ukraine? I don't think so. I think what the Poles are talking about is the reality that this war is going to generate up to 10 million refugees that Poland and Europe cannot absorb, and that Poland is looking at circumstances where they can deploy Polish troops, not as part of NATO, not as part of an Article 4 joint operation, but as a national movement, similar to what Turkey did in Syria. Turkey went into Syria with Turkish troops. He's a NATO country. But when the Syrian army and the Russians slapped them around, Turkey couldn't sit there and go, it's Article 5. No, you went in there as an independent nation. I think Poland's talking about making that move. And very dangerous situation. We just saw Belarus mobilize its forces along the Polish border. So what Poland needs to understand is that when Lukashenko said straight up, I ain't invading Ukraine. My job is to prevent you guys, Poland and the Balts, from stabbing my friend Putin in the back. So I'm protecting his flank. And if you want to make a move on Western Ukraine, bring it on, boys. Here we come. And now we're talking about a major expansion. And the third thing is Transnistria. Here, the Ukrainians have mobilized over 2,000 troops along the border. And they're sending more troops in that direction, including a lot of strategically valuable equipment, tanks, artillery, rockets. And you have to ask yourself why. And the answer is simple. Right now, Russia cannot, I believe, continue this very broad, deadly offensive in the east and make a move through the southern tier of Ukraine, through Odessa, through Transnistria with the forces available. Russia is fighting a holding action in Kherson, in Mykolaiv, just north of that. When they win this battle in the east, and they will win it, then they can divert forces now and have sufficient offensive combat power to make a move. What happens if the Ukrainians preempt the Russians and attack Transnistria, threaten 450,000 Russian speakers? What is Putin going to do? Sit back and do nothing? What is Moldova and Romania going to do? I mean, I don't trust the Moldovans as far as you can throw them. They are looking at this opportunity to say, we are here to fix an accident of history. In 1992, the Russians stole this land from us. We've never recognized it. Romania is now coming in, sending officers and equipment in to reinforce the Moldovan army. And I believe the Moldovans and the Ukrainians could very well launch a spoiling attack against Transnistria, compelling the Russians to stop their offensive in the east, divert offensive military power from the destruction of the trapped Ukrainian forces to rescue 450,000 Russians. Now you give those Ukrainian troops in the east a chance to rest, reorganize, refit, and it fundamentally changes the nature of of this war. This very dangerous thing, very dangerous thing. And I have to tell you, if I were Ukrainian general, I would think long and hard about doing it, meaning, yeah, I want to do this because it's the only way you're going to save 60,000 troops in the East. Otherwise, they're all going to die, literally. So you do this. Now, the danger here is that Putin has said, we have weapons we don't like to brag about, weapons only we have. And there's the important thing, only we have. These are hypersonic missiles, not nuclear weapons. These are the Kinzhals, and I believe even conventionally armed avant-gardes that will literally take out with pinpoint precision every leadership target involved in any action against Moldova, which means Zelensky's going to die, the prime minister of Moldova is going to die, Romania, Bucharest is going to be blown to smithereens. Russia's not playing games. They said the response will be that quick, and it will be. And that's the only thing, if I were a Ukrainian general, I would take pause and say, okay, would this be a Pyrrhic victory? Would we achieve a temporary, positive tactical operational advantage only to lose everything because now we really irritated the Russians and they're coming at us with a seriousness that they haven't yet done? Ask yourself, why only now are Russia dropping the trains? Why only now is Russia hitting the substations? Why haven't they done it always? Because Russia has never intended to destroy Ukraine as a modern nation state. Russia always intended to leave enough civilian infrastructure so that Ukraine could rebuild. That's over. Russia's now in the business of destroying Ukraine. And if Moldova and Romania want to play a game in Transnistria, Russia will destroy them, not with nuclear weapons, but with weapons that are just as deadly to the people who make the decision. Those are the things I really fear.
Ray McGovern, your thoughts. We got Transnistria, Moldova, we got Poland, we got the dangers of this war leaking and broadening. Your thoughts, Ray?
I guess what bothers me most is that in the coming weeks, the people in the United States who have been primed and kind of brainwashed to expect victory are going to see a rather decisive defeat coming at the hands of the Russians in the Donbass, Mariupol, and that area of southern Ukraine. Now, not only that, but you have really small approval for Joe Biden, the president of the United States. Putin enjoys over 80% approval. That's big, What does that mean? Well, that means that to the degree we don't understand what Nazis mean to Russians, Putin does. And his denazification campaign rings all kinds of bells with people my age, a little younger, and much older who went through World War II. Okay? So when May 9th comes and they celebrate VE Day, a victory in Europe, Nazis are going to be way up on the top of the consciousness of the Russian people, and Putin is going to feel empowered to move ahead and do what he can to get rid of the Nazis who are really calling a lot of the shots. Now, Mariupol, when they flush those people out, what are we going to find? Well, not only openly the Azov battalion or brigade or whatever it is now, but we may see Western advisors. We may see people in there with our kind of genes as Americans. In other words, it's going to get really messy. And so what is Biden going to do? Well, it's not an existential threat to the United States, what's going on in Ukraine, but it is an existential threat to the Democratic Party. They're going to take it on the chin in the midterms. This is very big. Biden has not only to show he's tough against Russia, but he's got to divert attention from the problems that his son Hunter has caused him. The problems that are now coming to the fore, where he was very much deeply involved in Russiagate, which has proved to be a hoax. He's in trouble politically. And so if Putin is right, looking at U.S. foreign policy and military policy being hostage, Putin's word, hostage to domestic political developments in the United States, we're in for a tough ride because Biden will have to decide what's more important to him, political survival of his party, in which case he's kinds of risks that no sensible Western politician should take vis-a-vis Russia, or whether he's willing to listen to common sense and to those few people that's still around that say, look, Mr. President, you're biting off a little bit more chew. We ought to take Putin's warnings not as boasts or empty warnings, but we ought to take them seriously because he looks at it differently. Again, I'll say, is an existential threat to Putin. That makes it very different from our situation. He has got to win, and he's going to pull everything that he has into the fray.
You know, I did want to ask you this. I'll put a couple things together. This for Scott, because I think it's important to address the disinformation that we're getting. One of the things that we get, I know I don't have this on our list, but this is an important topic, and I'm sure you'll both agree. One of the things that we get day in and day out is we're sending some tanks that we never heard of that are anti-aircraft, Hepard, Leopard, whatever tanks they're going, right? We're sending 78 howitzers. We're sending every day. Then Biden's like, we need to do Lend-Lease so we can get weapons. As I see the shape of the battlefield, I don't see a universe in which the Ukrainians can suddenly turn this thing around. Your thoughts on, and then of course again, the Russians have the hypersonic weapons. They have, the overwhelming a military escalatory force, particularly right on their border. Your thoughts on the constant barrage of, we're sending whatever the latest weapon is, more of these, we're training the Ukrainians, this whole, what I think is a psychological operation of propaganda regarding arming the Ukrainians so somehow they can turn the tide.
If I were the Russians and I wanted to create a disinformation campaign to get the other side to buy into, that guaranteed the defeat of Ukraine, it would be, I want the West to bankrupt itself by sending the Ukrainians as diverse and technologically complex a mix of weapons as possible. I want them to receive artillery systems that take years to train in terms of how to, because these are they're towed artillery, the M77s. But you got to stop, you got to break them down, you got to set them up, you got to do all this stuff. We spend years training American Marines and soldiers to do this that quick. And the one thing you learn in the artillery, and guess who was in the artillery, is if you it shoot, move, communicate. But if you shoot and you don't move, you die instantly because the Russians come in and they pound you. So now we've given them this artillery system that they've never used before. And one artillery piece is not like the other artillery piece. And so now these poor little Ukrainians are going to be coming out. First of all, it's towed, which means you have the trucks and you have the ammunition trucks, and all this stuff has to come together. So even if they survive the gauntlet, running the gauntlet, get to the front line, now they're setting this stuff up. And the Russians are overhead with a drone because Ukrainians don't have any air defense. And they're going, oh, look, wow. And we're going to fire they have this wonderful little laser guided munition that they fire. It costs $30,000 to make. It fires up there. The drone laser designates and bam, dead, bam, dead, bam, dead. We're sending in 90 M77s. The Russians got several thousand of these rounds, so I'm sure they can spare 90 to kill all of the wonderful artillery we've given. The truth is, every Ukrainian soldier that's involved in these artillery pieces is assured a death. We are committing murder, literally. This isn't helping the Ukrainians. This is killing the Ukrainians. The Gepard, first of all, even if they had the ammunition, and they don't, because the Swiss won't allow them to sell the ammunition, so now they're running around trying to buy it from Bulgaria and some other countries, the Germans. But even if they brought it in, the Germans are some of the finest mechanics in the world. The Gepard is my era weapon. I know the weapon. I know the Germans who used to operate the weapon. They hate the weapon because it breaks down all the time. They have to have Mercedes-Benz level, Porsche level mechanics. They're constantly tweaking it, making it work. It's complicated. It breaks the second you turn it on. You got to have somebody come in there and kick it and move it. And we're giving this to Ukrainians who've never used it before, who lack the training to maintain this thing. They're all going to die. They won't even get a round off. They'll be sitting there going, whoop, they'll try and spin the turret. Damn, what do I do? Boom, dead. You're gone. We're sending them 200 M113 APCs from the Vietnam War. Okay? They have no armor protection. Just ask the guys who fought in Vietnam. Why, when they went into Cambodia, did they put sandbags all over the damn thing? Because a 12.5 millimeter caliber rifle machine gun goes through it like a hot knife through butter. And they'll all be destroyed if they make it to the front line. But they have power packs that the Ukrainians don't know how to maintain. So they start it up, they move, bam, at a little click, it's broken. They're all going to break down before they get to the front line. We gave them 200 T-72 tanks that haven't been maintained for years. They've been in warehouses. And now we've come up, flushed the system real quick, hit the tires. Here you go, take them. They're all going to die. None of this stuff will work. None of it can be maintained. Logistics wins battles, and we've complicated the Ukrainian logistics support system by orders of magnitude, where it's a virtual guarantee of defeat. Why are we doing this then? Because trust me, the Americans know. The logisticians in the Pentagon are going, this ain't smart, guys, this ain't smart. But the president don't care, because it's not about saving Ukrainian lives. It's about saving political face here at home. This is so the president can say, I have done everything humanly possible, just like we did with Afghanistan. Remember, we flood them in with billions of weapons, and then they lose. Did we blame ourselves? No, we said those Afghans didn't know how to fight. They didn't know how to use the weapon. Well, they fought very hard. They lost tens of thousands of guys every month fighting in the end. They weren't cowards. But the stuff we gave them didn't work. Didn't work. And it's the javelins that we're sending over there. They're all old javelins. They've all expired. We keep talking about the miracle weapon of the javelin. Ask the Russians about it. How come when the tanks came in to be repaired, you got tanks being hit 6-7 times by javelins and walking right through it? Why? Well, half the time the warhead doesn't work. It's very old, high explosive, and it hasn't been changed out. So when it comes in, most of the time it malfunctions. Even when it goes off, it goes poof instead of boom, and nothing. The electronics that control the ailerons that guide it in jam. So you fire it, there it goes stupid, it's gone. Same thing with the in-laws. Every in-law that was sent by the British, light anti-tank weapon, expired. The Brits can't use it. They won't even issue it to their own troops, but we're giving it to the Ukrainians on the front line, and these brave SOBs are falling forward, thinking they're getting a kill shot. Bump up, bam, shoot, bam, off, boom, dead. That's how war works, man, and we're doing it to them. It disgusts me. Disgusts me. I'm sorry to get emotional, but, I have a soft spot in my heart for brave people. And, the Nazis aside, those damn Ukrainian soldiers are brave. They're putting up one hell of a fight. They're trying their best, but they have no chance. And one of the reasons why they have no chance is A, the Russians are better. The Russians have better equipment, but B, we've pumped them up with a false sense of capability by giving them weapons and telling them, this is the $1 million thing, man. All you have to do is get close, fire this baby off, and you're going to win the war. Ugh! And they do. Those bastards crawl through the artillery. They sit there, watch their guys get picked off, but they get close enough, bam, misfires, boom, you're dead. Because the Russians have effective overwatch. This is murder. Murder, and it's not being conducted by the Russians. The murder is being done by the politicians in the West that are pouring in billions of dollars of weapons and ammunition that simply make the situation even more tenuous for the Ukrainians. I took far too much time. Sorry about the emotion, but this kind of stuff really irritates me, because war is not a game. It's not a video game. This isn't Call of Duty. This isn't Medal of Honor. This isn't whatever stupidity politicians watch and think is real. This is bodies being blown apart, eviscerated, guts blown out on the battlefield, brains splattered on the wall. And it's happening. Hundreds of Ukrainians are losing their lives every single day in the most horrible manner possible, because we've convinced them they can fight and they can win. And they're trying. They're trying.
Fighting.
Ray, your thoughts on that, and add this in. Part of what, and Scott made a good point. You know, that there are intelligence and military analysts who know all of the things that you guys know in real time. So much of this is political. These, oh, I'm going to send them stuff. And then some other NATO partner, oh, yeah, well, I'll up you one and I'll send them. Oh, yeah, well, I'll one up you and send that one. On top of the fact that you've got Lockheed Martin or Raytheon, who've got a warehouse full of old missiles that they can't do anything with, that they can get rid of them and get paid for them. Your thoughts on this whole and the psyop that they can say to the American people, hey, look what we're doing. We're helping out those Ukrainians by sending them missiles. Your whole thing, your thoughts on this whole sending weapons to Ukraine boondoggle / money laundering scheme?
Well, I think it's going to come back to haunt us. In other words, what I anticipate is in a couple of weeks, it's going to be clear that this very slow moving Russian offensive against all these brave Ukrainians is going to win. It's going to win back what Putin had envisaged, southern, eastern Ukraine. Then what's the marination from the mainstream press going to look like? Well, that's going to be even more dangerous because we'll blame something. There will be orchestrated a chemical attack or something like that. But so we're fighting till the last Ukrainian. I think is shameless. I agree with Scott on that. I'd like to go back to this time last week. Actually, it's just 5 days ago on Sunday. Remember, we get the announcement from Zelensky that Secretary of State Biden, Secretary of Defense Austin, were going to visit Kiev, and they're going to have consultations. And then all of a sudden, no comment from anybody. Well, I can understand security concerns, but that doesn't square with Zelensky announcing it a day ahead. What's he doing? Well, what I think happened, and this is speculation, mind you, I think Biden went to Lavrov and said, "Oh, by the way, we'd like to visit Kiev. We just don't want any trouble, so we're going to go in there," just like Boris Johnson did, and just want to let you know. And Lavrov checked with Putin and said, "Hey, Blinken, that's not a good idea. It's not a good idea at all. No one's flying into Kiev anymore. All right? So you come to Kiev, you're on your own, okay?" So Blinken said, "We better not do this." Zelensky announces it. It's not possible not to do this. So what do? They fly into some airfield in southern Poland and then take a train. And they take a train to Kiev. If they got to Kiev, no one knows for sure. And they have this thing for 3 hours, then shoot back, and they make an announcement in Poland. What did the Russians do almost immediately after that? They bombed all the trains. They bombed all the train junctures, the ones that really count. So, this is getting pretty ugly. And the fact that Blinken and Austin let themselves be mousetrapped by Zelensky into going ahead with this charade, and then started telling NATO and everybody else that, Ukraine can win. Well, it's really unconscionable to say Ukraine can win when it's a pretty sure thing that Ukraine can't win, that Putin must win, and that this is an existential threat that Putin will not back down on. So we're left with a real dilemma here. And when push comes to shove and the Russians start palpably winning, then the mainstream media is going to have to concoct some other explanation for this. And God knows what they'll do, because it won't be pretty. It'll be very ugly.
Scott, let's move to the Pacific, and that is Scott Morrison. He is the Australian. We'll call him the leader. We know that in the mid 1970s, the United States overthrew the government of Australia and replaced their leader. So the reality is there really a leader of Australia that's not in Washington, D.C.? One could argue that there isn't, but the Chinese have signed a security deal with the Solomon Islands, And Solomon's Islands said, sure, you can bring your ships in here and you can surface them and maintain them, get water, food, things of that nature. And the Chinese said, of course, they got lots of money. Hey, man, we'll upgrade your infrastructure. We'll provide you with some security. Everybody's happy. Now, here's what's important to me. The United States, one of their arguments was that Ukraine is an independent country, which of course we know it isn't, and that independent sovereign nations can choose their alliances, and Russia has no right to say anything about the alliances of Ukraine, Russia being 1 millimeter, less than a millimeter, from the Ukrainian border. The Solomons Island is 7,391 miles from the United States border. The United States and Australia has said Solomon at 1,000 kilometers from Australia that the Solomon Islands are a red line, and that the United States has threatened military action against a sovereign nation that is choosing its own alliances. Your thoughts of what's happening in the Pacific and the absurdity of that, but the reality, the military reality of it too.
Well, let's start with the military reality. The United States and Australia and other nations have long been resisting China's efforts to militarize what they call the 9-dash line. That is China's claim on the territorial waters that extend from the continental shelf off of the Chinese continent. And in the South China Sea, China has taken over certain natural atolls, and then they've used sand dredging to expand these and to create additional ones. And they've been doing this for a decade, and we've been saying no, no, no. Well, with all the Ukrainian stuff going on, people missed a couple months ago where China said, we're done. We finished. We got it all militarized now. We got our radars up, our anti-ship missiles, our anti-aircraft missiles. We got airfields that can surge fighter airplanes in. We've got the bunkers full of ammunition. We're ready to go to war. And the United States, Australia, and everybody went, oops, we got no counter to this. The counter was for the United States to pull back and create a new ring of military installations and defenses surrounding the 9-dash line, anchored with places like Guam, where we already have significant military capability. But a key element to this was, we recognize now that China's militarized those islands, we can't sail our Navy straight up. Man, we just got a lesson on how vulnerable the Navy is when the Moskva got hit, double tapped, and went down. Okay, big ships don't do well next to shores that are defended by coastal defense missiles. And we got a lot of big ships in the Pacific, and the closer they get to the South China islands controlled by the Chinese, the more likely is they will be sunk almost immediately in any war. So our response, the Marine Corps has taken a lead on this. General Berger has revamped the Marine Corps. He's gotten rid of tanks. He's gotten rid of a whole bunch of stuff. And we've come up with new, maritime power projection regiments, which are designed, instead of sending Marines across the beach 10,000 at a time, we put them a dozen here, a dozen there. We throw long-range missiles on a C-130 that lands on an island strip in the Solomon Islands and offloads, and fire some missiles off against, and then takes off. The Chinese can't get it, sort of the hit and run kind of thing. That's the whole thing we've done. We're pouring billions of dollars. Ray just said it. Number one threat's China. The Pentagon has come up with this great plan. We're going to beat the Chinese. Oh, shoot. They just did a deal with the Solomon Islands. They just basically took the big balloon we created, punched a hole in it, and all the air is going out. We got no more plan. We literally have no more plan. Now, the Chinese just outmaneuvered us. It's checkmate. And that's why you're seeing the panic, because normally people, to be honest, it's not that big of a deal. The Chinese, first of all, the Solomon Islands leader has said, no, we're not asking the Chinese to put a military base in, and we won't. And the Chinese aren't asking to put a military base in. There's the potential, if both sides agree, that this could happen. But all China's saying is, we want this. This is about the economy, stupid. To borrow, the old phrase. China's beating us economically. They're beating us militarily without firing a shot. but they're destroying us economically. They've outmaneuvered us everywhere. Trump pulled out of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. China moved in to sign the largest ever free trade agreement the world has ever seen that doesn't include the United States. Wow, that's genius on the part of America. We designed the TPP to keep China out, and they flip it in a classic wrestling reversal. 2 points, China, and they now have the largest free trade agreement that we're not part of. And now they've moved into the Solomon Islands. My daughter attends Georgetown University, and she was at a lecture just the other day, and I'll leave it with this. And I won't say who it was, and I won't say what they were talking about, but the bottom line is the United States, when we talk about what we can do, we have diplomatic things that we can bring to bear. We have economic things, we have military things, and then we have like humanitarian things. We do very poorly in the economic, meaning that when people are looking for help, America is just not there with the dollar, because every dollar we put out has strings attached to make it too complicated. The Chinese have no strings attached. It's just basically a contract. Contract terms are very beneficial to China. I'm not going to lie.
Certainly.
A lot of people are very upset about, incurring a lot of debt that's going to be owned by China. But the Chinese just come in and say, there's the business contract, sign it. We don't care what kind of government you have. We don't care about anything. We don't care what kind of flag you have. We don't care if you like homosexuals. If you do, we don't care. It's a business deal. Sign it. And that's why they win, because nobody wants to do business with America anymore, because there's too many strings attached, and these strings come with levers of control in the government. The Chinese aren't doing that. The Solomon Islands needed help. Australia is in the position where they could have helped the Solomon Islands. Australia could have spent millions of dollars providing economic assistance, no strings attached. Instead, they're spending billions of dollars on weapon systems, submarines, that they're never going to be able to use, probably never be able to acquire. They ignored the Solomon Islands. They treated them like a colony, like an occupied people. The Chinese came in and treated them with respect. And guess which way the Solomon Islands jumped? And guess which way everybody else in the Pacific is going to be jumping pretty soon? Our way of doing business is no longer acceptable to sovereign people. America used to be the big bully that could come in and push its weight around. Not anymore. We're a joke, literally a joke with nuclear weapons. We got enough. We let the Chinese beat us in the Pacific. Think about that. We let the Chinese beat us in the Pacific, where we've had total control over that area for 7 decades since the Second World War. And the Chinese just beat us without firing a shot. No, the
Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu. Ray McGovern,
Yeah.
Solomon's Island, Taiwan, the Pacific, China. Your thoughts?
Well, to quote President Biden, you don't realize that China's not going to beat us on his watch.
Yeah.
That's why he gets the limos and I don't.
Yeah. Well, when you think of it, here he is 6 weeks into his tenure as president, and he gets up and he says precisely that. Chinese not going to be the biggest superpower on my watch. Well, why not? The Chinese an expansive nation? Do they want to take over the world like the old Chi-Coms, the old Russia? No, they're inward looking. They got a lot of problems of their own, okay? They're defensive. Their installations in the East and South Pacific are defensive against the 7th Fleet, pure and simple, what the 7th Fleet has tried to do. And, it just, you could say this to a middle schooler. The Chinese say, why can't we have a win-win? Why does it always have to be a zero sum? Why do you always have to win and we lose? Okay. The Chinese have a long cultural history. They don't quite understand why it can't be that we can live together, even if Russia outstrips us economically. Why can't we just live together? Now, not understanding why we're so bellicose and why they are the next target and enemy number one in that strategic, every 4 years, the Pentagon puts together this strategic document, and China is first. Russia doesn't even make the top 4. So here's President Xi looking at this. Surely he's been briefed on it and said, well, should I be proud that we're number one, or should I be fearful? He doesn't have the option of being proud. He's got to be fearful. And to that extent, he's going to support Putin. And that's a big new reality. And I'm not sure that Blinken or not or Sullivan or anybody got that through their head. Last thing I'll say is to remind that this time last year, it's 2 weeks after Biden said to Putin, oh, let's meet. This Ukraine thing is really getting out of hand. Let's meet. 2 weeks after that, he was briefed by Blinken and Sullivan to say, oh, we got it. We got it. The Russians are faced with a real threat from China. They're being squeezed by China. They know that China is going to be a military power as well as economic power. They get thousands of miles of border. Oh, they're really being squeezed. Now, how do I know that? I know that because hours after the summit, Biden, they're trying to get him on a plane, right? Come on, Joe. No. I want to talk to the press. No, it's not appropriate for me to say exactly what I said to Putin, but I told him we know his problem with China, that he's being squeezed and he got the long way. So he's got real stuff to over. Now, that was that was true 5 decades ago. It's not true now. And all I'm saying here is the Russia and China did everything they could, Putin and Xi, to make it clear to everyone, including the dunderheads that are advising Biden, that no, it's an alliance now that exceeds a normal alliance that has no real limits. That's the new reality. It's a tectonic shift in what the Russians used to call the world correlation of forces. One cannot exaggerate its significance.
Can I
go ahead, Ray? I mean, Scott.
Real quick thing here. China, number one threat. China is differentiated its situation with Taiwan from that of what Russia has done with Ukraine by noting that Ukraine is a sovereign state and that Taiwan is part of China. Right. And the Taiwanese have been very reticent and unhappy about, Taiwan's continued quote unquote independent status, but quasi-independent status. But China has said straight up, we will not invade Taiwan unless they declare independence. That everything that we hope to gain from Taiwan, we're already getting. I mean, we control them economically. We're just going to continue to take over their economy, and we're going to win the Taiwanese people over just by making them the richest people on the planet, and that wealth comes solely from us. We gain nothing and we lose everything if we invade the island, kill all the people, blow up all the cities, destroy all the industry. But we will do this if they declare independence. Now, if I were the United States, I would say, well, we must make sure that Taiwan never, ever, A, declares independence, and B, creates the perception that they're getting ready to declare independence. But that's not what's happening. In the next week or so, I think we are now going to get the official Biden administration policy on China, on Taiwan. And it's going to include, things such as we're now going to up the political discourse. We already saw Nancy Pelosi fly there. The Chinese were not happy about that. We're going to increase the quality and quantity of weapons being sent to Taiwan. And we may increase military on military connectivity. That includes the potential preparation for rapid reinforcement of Taiwan with American troops and maybe Japanese troops in time of war. These are all the kind of things that if I'm a Chinese general, I'd say, well, Article 51, preemptive self-defense, we're not going to let them do this and wait until they get all their pieces in. The moment Taiwan buys into this and says something that appears they've made a fundamental shift is the moment that Taiwan ceases to exist. They're not going to nuke them, but the war will be short. It'll be bloody. Understand, it will not be Ukraine. The Taiwanese military is not that good. They really aren't. They don't have great equipment. The Chinese can destroy it almost all instantaneously with a preemptive strike, and there's no way to reinforce them. There's no way to reinforce them. We don't have pre-positioned stocks. It would take us 4 to 9 months to generate up, 400 to 900,000 troops to send to Taiwan. The war will be over in a matter of weeks, but then it'll be bad for China. China doesn't want that. And I wish somebody who does policy in Washington, D.C. for a second would do what we didn't do with Russia. We could have prevented this war in Russia had we just sat back and reread William Byrd's February 2009 memorandum, "Niet means niet." All we had to do is sit back and reread it and go, oh yeah, I guess no does mean no. Maybe we don't want to expand into Ukraine. Maybe we can find a different way of doing this to avoid a war, to create peace and stability, especially if we're viewing China as our number one threat. The last thing we want to do is commit the United States now to a multi-decade long $1 trillion, because by the time we start sending troops over, it's $1 trillion plus a diversion of our attention and resources when we're supposed to be focused on China. But on China too, if we would just sit down and say, Taiwan, it's a foregone conclusion how it's going to end. There's no way that this turns into a Taiwanese or American victory. So instead, why don't we promote a peaceful resolution to this problem by encouraging China to absorb Taiwan intact as is, so that the only thing that changes is the Taiwanese flag goes down, the Chinese Communist flag goes up, but everything else stays the same. The same democracy, the same voting, the same autonomy, the economy, the whole thing. That way we have leverage. You know how we lose all leverage in Taiwan? Had the Chinese communists come across, take it over. They got no leverage anymore. The way you maintain leverage is to negotiate the peaceful resolution of this giant thorn in China's side, so that we're the interim, we're the guys in between making it happen. It's called diplomacy. We used to teach it in Washington, D.C. at one time. And if we did it, we could be the winners. But instead, we're going to be the losers.
Ray McGovern, we got one more subject we want to get to, but before, I see that Ray is chomping at the bit. He's got some comments on that, and we definitely want to hear it. Your thoughts, Ray, on the Taiwan situation.
I agree with Scott, but I think that one thing that needs to be mentioned is the fact that we are the city on the hill. We are exceptional. Actually, we're indispensable. Now, I've come around to believe, hard as it is to believe, that the Blinkens and the Sullivans and the privileged ivy-clad brains, if they're brains in Washington, really believe that. And of course, it was true at one time. It's not true anymore. That's one thing. The other thing is you have peaceful resolutions of these things. If it's a win-win sort of thing, there's a lose-lose factor to this, and that is the Mickey Mat, the military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex that needs enemies, both in Europe and in China, to build more ships and more whatever. So, what Eisenhower warned about is exactly what's happening. And he appended to that warning the fact that the only antidote, the only way that the accretion of power of the MIC, the military industrial complex in those days, can be prevented is a well-informed citizenry. Now, we ain't got that. There's no prospect we will have that anytime soon. Why? Because media is the cornerstone of the Mickey Mat. It's the media that's controlled by the rest of the Mickey Mat. And so to mislead American people into thinking we are exceptional, we are indispensable, and we can do what we want. And that's the tragedy of all this, because this can end up in, as the Chinese used to say way back when, this could come to a no good end.
Last subject we want to hit. It's important. Iran is extremely important if you look at where it sits and what's happening between the Middle East and Eurasia. You've got Pakistan, Afghanistan. I mean, everything where it's sitting is very critical. It's a powerful, independent nation. and Global Times, which is I suggest that people read, go to the Global Times. I see it as a window into the thinking of the leadership of China. Chinese Defense Minister Iran trip to help lift military ties to unprecedented level. Chinese State Counselor and Minister of National Defense Wei Fang met with Iranian President Abraham Raisi on Wednesday. Both sides agreed to further deepen cooperation in military and other areas during a rare visit. They go on to say that experts say they could help elevate China-Iran military ties to an unprecedented level against the backdrop of an increasingly hostile U.S. and a tumultuous global situation. China is testing hypersonic missiles. China has very advanced fighters. They've got advanced technological equipment and missiles. And you do not underestimate the Iranians. They have some brilliant scientists and technology experts. In the multipolar world, Russia, China, I see India and Iran, because of the Middle East, as very important. It seems to me that it's quite possible that the Chinese and or the Russians are considering arming the Iranians to the teeth as a hedge against the U.S. Let's start with you. Your thoughts, Scott?
No, you're absolutely right. Again, first of all, Iran as a nation has outfoxed, outmaneuvered, and outwitted the United States for decades now. Our sanctions programs have never worked. The more we try and restrict and constrain them, the more influential they become regionally. They are the number one player in the Persian Gulf region today, period.
And maybe South America. Very powerful. Venezuela, very powerful in Venezuela.
Well, the Iranians, have not rolled over and played dead the way we expected them to when we hit them with the massive economic sanctions. And Israel's plans on coming into the Persian Gulf. NATO once had plans on coming into the Persian Gulf, all as a mechanism of containing Iran. Iran won't be contained. Fortunately for the world, Iran is not an irresponsible power, and the operations that it undertakes regionally are designed to be more defensive in nature, meaning to defend Iranian interests than to project Iranian power in an irresponsible fashion. So I just start off by saying that in its own right, Iran has done quite well. But now it comes back to Putin and Xi meeting in Beijing on February 4th. Iran is now a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO. That is a military and economic grouping of nations where, and we saw the power of the SCO when Russia sent troops to Kazakhstan after the attempted color revolution there. So there's a military aspect to this as well. But the biggest aspect of the SCO is its role in facilitating what was described in the Russian-Chinese statement of February 4th as a trans-Eurasian economic union. Again, I come back to, it's the economy, stupid. You can play little boy games all you want. You can buy all the weapons you want. You can move stuff around. But at the end of the day, the strongest economy is going to win. And Iran right now is literally latching on to the strongest economy in the world, the Chinese. Now, China will protect its economic interests, recognizing that Iran lives in a dangerous area. But it's not just military cooperation that they're talking about here. We're talking about the extension of the Silk Road into Persia, and the benefit that's going to accrue both ways. Iran is a force enhancer. They bring a lot to the table, and when you integrate Iran into this trans-Eurasian economic union, you are bringing in some of the world's greatest brain trap power, some of the most innovative thinkers, some of the best scientists. Who else has tested hypersonic weapons? Iran. So, gee, we can't even test one yet. Every time we put a hypersonic weapon up, it fails. Iran's tested it; they work. So this is we're looking at a transformation of geopolitical reality. And it's not just the military, although it's important what China's doing, but be careful about unprecedented, the term, because when you start with nothing, it's unprecedented if you do anything. And so it's not like China and Iran had this great history of, wonderful military cooperation. They have some, and what we're seeing is an expansion of it. But it doesn't mean that China's coming in and taking over military industry for Iran. What it means is that China is gradually and responsibly getting influence in Iran, one of the most difficult countries in the world to get influence in. Even Russia has had problems. The Iranians are terribly insular. They don't want to be beholden to anybody. They trust no one. So to let China in and to let China get involved in military industry is an indication that Iran has made a decision. And this is something that they've been talking about for years. Iran has always been, because of the history of the Shah, and even prior to that, a Western-leaning nation. Even when Khomeini came into power, Iran always wanted to go back to the West. When Rafsanjani took over after the Iran-Iraq War, he wanted to pivot to the West. He wanted to bring in the Western businesses. He wanted to build up, take advantage of Western wealth. There's always been a minority, though, that said, hey, the West sucks. They don't like us. And we got to stop trusting them. Why don't we pivot east? And there's always been a hesitation. There's always been, no, the Chinese, the Russians, no. The West, we're comfortable with the West. That's over. They're pivoting east right now. Iran is divorcing itself from the West. And that's what the importance of this thing, because it's one more step in the direction of a total eastward pivot by Iran.
Ray McGovern.
By Russia as well. The analogy screams out for it being spelled out. Ever since, in Russian history, they were after the Mongols invaded Russia, they had to contend with invasions from the Swedes, from the Lithuanians, and especially from the Poles and from the Hanseatic League, the Germans, okay? And they weren't able to fight those off until pretty much when Peter the Great came in about 1700 and said, let's beat a window into Western Europe. We have contained them. Let's join the West. And that has been the primary motivation of Russian leaders. We're really part of the West. We have this problem with China, but that's changed now. And just as you explained the Iranian dilemma, having tried and been predisposed to, after all, we were allies just 77 years ago, for God's sake. We beat the Nazis together, okay? So instead of being accepted as more than just a gas station posing as a country, okay? Here's Tchaikovsky and Pushkin pumping gas, right? Give me a break. Instead of being demeaned and you're just kind of dissed, they expected better. Now, Lavrov has said, the foreign minister has said explicitly, we're done trying to deal with NATO and the West. He's making a virtue out of necessity. Who else is he going to turn? But this necessity is a really big power, okay? And it's not only China, it's Iran, as you just said. Scott, you've written books about Iran. You know it in and out. It's Iran, and it's India, and it's Saudi Arabia, it's Pakistan, it's all kinds of people of color. So we've sort of divided the world now. I say bipolar rather than multipolar because it's the white West against people of color in the East, to include the Russians because we've blackened them into people of color as well, right?
Yeah, they're at least Asians at minimal now. I saw something like the New York Times had Putin, and he was an Asian, and they had something like he's now turned to Asian. I guess he can't be a European anymore.
You know what they really resent, the Russians, is this expression, you scratch a Russian and you find a Tatar. Well, it is true. From 1240 forward 2 centuries, Genghis Khan and his horde ruled Russia, all of Russia. It took them 2 centuries to get rid of them. at a time when the West was coming into the Enlightenment, out of the Dark Ages, into the Renaissance. Okay, so Russia has always been a couple of centuries behind. They've always felt that. Are they as bright as the West? Sure, they're as bright as the rest. Gagarin was the first guy to fly in space, right? Always played.
Oh, he's been canceled, so we can't not allowed to talk about him anymore.
Creates a kind of a complex where they're not taking us seriously. They're still not taking us seriously. Okay, we'll develop hypersonic weapons. They go, oh, they're still not. Okay, well, we have to turn to somebody who's a little bit more, who's a lot more reliable. We don't particularly relish it, but Z calls me, Putin, his best friend. Let's buy into that, for God's sake. And if they're willing to support us in the East, we can put them in the West as well.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm going to bring Regis up and thank all three of you guys. I see Regis is still hanging around hanging around. Regis Tremblay, we certainly want to thank you. Scott Ritter, Ray McGovern. I want to thank everybody who's watched it. I want to thank everybody with the who's done the super chats and contributed today. I'm actually meeting with the guy to get my website up today. I appreciate it. But you guys, let me just say this. I'll say what I'll tell both Scott and Ray what I told Regis. I have Pacifica radio shows, one in Washington, D.C., WPFW, one KPFK in Los Angeles. And when I first started, when the Ukraine crisis started, I took my stand and people called in and they called me a Putin stooge and a Russian bot, all the usual stuff you get. Things have changed. And the callers now call and say, thank you, Garland. Keep telling the truth. We appreciate it. You're opening our eyes. So the work that we all are doing, and I don't know if I can call it work, we're just telling the truth and giving our honest professional opinions is making a difference. And I certainly want to thank you guys all for coming on. Regis, Scott, Ray, I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Gentlemen, Regis, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, great show. Ray, Scott, loved it. Ray, we got to have you back real soon.
Sounds good, Regis.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, everyone in the chat room. Take it easy, guys. It's been wonderful. And I'll talk to you soon. Have a great Saturday.
Okay. Thanks.
All righty. There we go. Well, that was fantastic. That was a lot of fun. We've got 220 people. I want to thank everyone. If anybody can do a super chat at the end, that would be great. I'm meeting with my website guy. If you've been paying attention to how this show and to how this channel has been developing over the last couple of months, you understand that I am serious about creating a new media outlet. I am serious about giving people an opportunity to hear from expert analysts and to be part of a very important discussion. And I appreciate everyone out there. Those of you who can contribute, go to the patreon.com/Garland Nixon and become a patron. Those of you who can do super chats during my show, I certainly appreciate it. And those of you who can't afford it, don't worry about it. Enjoy it. Learn what you can, spread the news to your friends, and I really appreciate it. At Garland Nixon. Oh, by the way, smash that like button. 200 and some people here. I got to see 200 likes for this show. So everybody just go up right now and hit the like button. Share this on all of your social media platforms so everybody gets a chance to see it and learn, and hopefully we can spread a word that will help to educate people and help to push for peace and knowledge. Additionally, if you're watching this on Facebook, if you're watching this on Twitter, go to my YouTube show and become a member, subscribe, and click the little bell so that you can ideally get notifications. We know that there's a Ministry of Truth now, so those things may not work. I'm really excited about getting a Rockfin page, so I'm working on getting my Rockfin page up and running so that I'll have alternatives. Again, we got a Ministry of Truth now, so those of us who are working to get truthful information out may need to consider some other options, and I'm definitely going to be doing a lot of stuff on Rockfin. Let's see what some of my dear friends are saying. Lee Nguyen says, awesome talk. More of Scott Ritter, please. Wow, Scott's great. Scott and Ray, man, how fortunate am I? How fortunate are you? How fortunate are we as a kind of an online family to be able to get Regis and Scott and Ray and these kind of brilliant people on so that we can learn. Being here says, thanks, guys. You're truly awesome. Viking Dave says, great show. Chicken Patty, you know, Chicken and I are very, very close. We've been together online for a long time. Chicken Patty, I'm her, she's not my number one fan. I'm Chicken Patty's number one fan. So I want to thank Laurie McGow says, fantastic panel, Garland. Looking forward to your Rockfin channel. And let's see, we got some more. We got some super chats in here. I'll try to go through the super chats before I leave. Zero Cool says, China is surrounded by U.S. bases. What I am afraid most is Taiwan. U.S. government outwardly maintain one China policy, but all actions by U.S. government is encouraging separatists in Taiwan to head for independence. You are right. And if that happens, Taiwan will surely act. China will surely act. So how about this? G-Dog K2K2 says, thank you all. And what do we got here? Pacheco Rain says, thank you, gentlemen, for speaking out. Oh, we've got lots and lots of people who are helping. And I'm glad because I'm going to be meeting with my guy today. Zero Cool, thank you very much. There's a super chat. We've got Red Pill Scholar. How much longer can the U.S. last until the economy completely implodes like the old, like in the old USSR? You are quite correct, sir. Red Pill Scholar also says, only the guilty fear judgment. Only liars need to stifle the truth. Gonzalo Lear. Yeah, Gonzalo's great. I watch him a lot on Alexander McCurris and the Duran. You guys know. I'm sure everybody watching this knows Alexander and the Duran. We really enjoy them. Thanks a lot, everybody. Well, it's Saturday. I got important things to do. I know you do. This was the most important, but if you can, my Patreon page is great. Follow me on Twitter and go there. I don't really have much on it, but I do need some economic help to get this thing up and going. The contributions that I get will be used to build this media outlet. So understand that everybody here, even the people that click likes, even the people that maybe don't have the money, those that are sharing stuff are part of helping building a media platform that before you know it, it's going to be awesome. And we're all going to say we were here when it started. Thanks a lot. Peace.